Why are there so many shows starring Muppets and dozens of movies too? They said they'd watch everyone and they mean it. It's something that they've got to do. So now they've pledged you a lifelong commitment. The Muppets, Matthew and Sam.
Welcome to Commitment, the podcast where two friends have vowed to watch all things Muppets. I'm Matthew Gatos.
And I'm Sam Schultz.
And this week, for the first time in nearly 4 months, we make our triumphant return to the Commitment timeline as we continue through the spring of 1989 by watching the special Sesame Street 20 and Still Counting, and also part and most of the documentary, The Sesame Street Experiment. But that's really not all, because we are once again joined by a special guest. Today, it is Tough Pigs writer and host of the Tough Pigs podcast, a Prairie Dawn companion. Becca Petunia's here.
I'm really excited to be here. I'm a big fan of your show. I'm a big fan of the Muppets and Sesame Street especially. So I'm really glad that I get to be here on this episode. And I'm glad I get to return to the timeline because it was kind of scary for a while there.
It was getting grim.
We had a summer off because, my wife had a child. So I had to, take some easier episodes and just talk to some friends of the pod instead of watching things. And now we are returning to watching things. And the first thing I had to watch stars Bill Cosby. So, whatever. Interesting vibe to return to. But before we talk about any of what we're actually here to talk about today, we have to talk to you, Becca, about you. Because, you haven't been on the podcast before. And we got to let our audience know who the heck you are, how you got into Muppets, and maybe, because they won't see this, a little bit about the room you're currently seated in.
I like how you phrase that like I'm going to say, I'm sitting right here in the Jim Henson Muppet Workshop.
She's on the stoop of 1-2-3 Sesame.
I mean, I wish. Listen, I've been there, but not to brag too much. I've been there 3 times, but not to brag too much.
They should let us podcast from there. Come on. We should podcast from Bert and I bet Bert and Ernie podcast. Don't you think they probably?
Oh, they absolutely
podcast?
do. There's been some TikTok clips on the Sesame Street socials of Bert and Ernie podcasting.
Oh wow, they're just like us.
Yeah, I'll link it to you guys. But So like Sam and Matt said, my name is Becca Petunia. I've been writing for Tough Pigs for 11 years now.
Wowza.
I started writing for Tough Pigs in 2014, but I've really been a major Muppet fan, Muppet obsessive my entire life. I'm younger than Sam and Matt by a little bit.
Wow, drag us.
That didn't seem necessary to mention.
What I meant to say
These
is...
two old guys over here. If you want a young, vital host of your podcast, come over to Tough Pigs.
Oh, yeah, where most of the Tough Pig staff are older than you guys.
No, yeah, you're just coming for all of us. You're trying to take us all. All these old guys gotta go.
But, so... I was born in 1991, and I bring this up not to insult Sam and Matt, but to be like, by all accounts, I was not born at the right time to be a Muppet fan. I was born after Jim Henson's death. But my father was a huge Muppet fan, basically from the Ed Sullivan days.
Oh, wow.
He adored the Muppets. So I grew up in a house where the Muppets were just everywhere, and they were just a part of growing up. So, for instance, my childhood quilt was a Muppet Show blanket. It had Kermit and Gonzo and Fozzie and Animal and Piggy on it. And my dad and mom used to read to me from the Sesame Street Treasury every night. And literally, my first word was Oscar, and my second word was Grover, because it was just
great.
like, these are important things. This is something that I was like, this is an important thing to know, even as an infant. And my dad had a bunch of stuff taped, a lot of season 5 of The Muppet Show, some Jim Henson Hour, actually, a couple of weirder things, like a taped version of Muppet Vision that was really low quality, but I watched all the time anyway. So I really just grew up in this, like, so embedded in this, in the same way I've said before, but like in the same way that sometimes if a father is like a major fan of a particular sports team, it's like, of course the kids are going to grow up to be Yankees fans. Like, if you know, again, if there were Kermit stuff everywhere in my house, of course I was going to grow up to love Kermit. And, you know, over the years, my Muppet fandom has kind of shifted and grown. And it's the kind of thing now where I love sort of thinking about the Muppets through different lenses, often through the lenses of sort of like social issues of the different historical eras where we're seeing them, which, you know, my newest Tough Pigs podcast, and I had another Tough Pigs podcast before, I had 2 other Tough Pigs podcasts before, Hubbawa and Bear in the Big Blue podcast. And Matt, you were on Hubbawa. Sam, I wanted you to be on Hubbawa, but then the show ended before I could schedule you.
I see.
It was entirely because of that. I was like, I can't let Sam on this show.
That's right. Gotta cancel it.
I put it into my contract with my episode. I was like, wow, if I'm on this show, Sam is never allowed to be on this show.
No, I do need to be clear. When you emailed me, you were like, are you sure Sam can't be on the show? Like, you didn't want to do it without Sam. And I was like, I already have a second guest, but like, I'll get to Sam eventually. And then the show ended.
He gets scared if I'm not there.
Yeah.
But
my security Sam.
Yeah.
My current podcast, you know, A Prairie Dawn Companion, is really about that. And it's about thinking about the Muppets in the context of culture of the 70s, and specifically like feminist culture of the 70s. And it's been really fun to kind of think of it that way. You know, I think there's nothing in the world that we can't take seriously if we want to. And there's nothing in the world that we can't learn from by taking seriously. So that's kind of been a lot of how I approach the Muppets these days, which is a weird way to be, but you know what? That's who I am, and that's what I do.
I mean, you're in the right
makes a lot of
place.
sense. Yeah, totally. I mean, that's I feel that too, what you just said about there's nothing you can't take seriously and learn from. I mean, even just the context of when things happen, and we've learned so much just like, you know, seeing the culture of the 60s and the 70s and yeah, thinking about things like that.
And you guys really get to do that by watching like all of like the talk show appearances.
Yes.
You know, many of which I have not seen.
The things we run into most often that Sam says, like, this shouldn't count towards what we have to watch,
Yes.
are sometimes the, like, you know, things close to what we watch today, where it is a news report or a documentary about what we have watched. And sometimes he's absolutely right. Sometimes those things were pointless for us to watch. Other times, like today, I think they do add context and they do give you insight into the era that you're watching these things in, because so often we are in this bubble and focused on just the stuff we're watching and not necessarily thinking about what else is on TV or what else is happening in the background. Like, something we constantly forget to think about is the fact that the Muppet meeting films are consistently being produced throughout this whole time period, but we watch them all in like episode 3 of this podcast.
That was such a weird episode of your podcast, boys. Like, let me be clear. We didn't know what we were doing. As I was listening to it, I was like, what are they? This doesn't make sense.
No, it was crazy.
And I was right. It didn't.
Crazy.
That was the early days of this podcast. We had no idea what the hell we were doing. But also, it was just me saying, I guess we can watch all 4 hours of this in 1 week and then discuss it. And somehow we did that, and the episodes were actually much shorter than they are these days.
I mean, I remember when you were doing 4 Muppet Show episodes in one, and I was like...
Yeah, That was
Again,
rough.
I was listening to this and I'm like, I don't know what they're doing, but like, you know, more power to them.
Sometimes it was fine because some Muppet Show episodes are just like whatever. But sometimes, yeah, it would get rough when we'd be like 2 in and we'd be 2 hours into the episode. I'd be like,
Yep.
oh my god,
Yeah.
oh my god.
And I'm sitting there, you know, like cleaning the bathroom, and I'm like, what episode are we even on right now?
Get that bathroom real nice and clean.
Yeah, exactly.
Episode that
I've
long.
been cleaning this bathroom for 4 hours. We're still talking about Lyndon Ronstadt. Yeah, no, I think like it actually has warped my like memory of the Muppet Show a little bit, so much so that now when I listen to Muppeturgy talk about episode by episode, I'm like, did I watch that? That doesn't sound familiar at all. And I'm like,
Yeah.
of course we did.
Well,
but
they
my
go
memory
into
of it,
so much depth. It's
Yeah.
like
and that's the thing is like our mission from the beginning for this podcast has been more about like the progression, moving forward, watching everything, as opposed to like we are not the podcast who's going to deep dive into every moment of every episode. Like we don't have 1,000 years to do that, so we are, you know, moving at our own clip, and a lot of times it won't make sense, and we'll make up the rules as we go along.
We're not watching most of Sesame Street, but have you watched most of Sesame Street at least to a certain point?
God. So I mean, the whole thing is like most of these episodes are not readily accessible.
Yeah.
You know, what people don't realize, and it was driving me crazy because they recently announced, right, that the Sesame Street library was coming to YouTube.
Yeah.
And I saw a number of people throughout fandom spaces posting, guys, the complete Sesame Street library is coming to YouTube.
Right.
And I'm like, guys, there are literally thousands of hours of Sesame Street content.
Right. Because they said in the post that they would be posting hundreds of full episodes, and people were like, oh my God, that must be everything, without realizing that no, that's like 2 seasons of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. So the answer I'm going to give is like, I consider myself to be really knowledgeable about Sesame Street. Less knowledgeable than some of my friends at Muppet Wiki, but I consider myself to be really knowledgeable. And I've probably seen a lot of the recurring sketches on the show. I might venture to say that I've seen a majority of the recurring sketches on the show. But I'm constantly finding new things to be surprised by, and that's kind of been the point of A Prairie Dawn Companion. Again, my podcast, is I've been really doing the deep dives and trying to sort of fill in the holes that I've missed. Like, I mean, I'd seen one clip with Rodeo Rosie in it, but now in preparing to record an episode on Rodeo Rosie, I've seen all 6 clips with Rodeo Rosie in them.
Anytime you got a Muppet with teeth, I feel like they're visually going to stick in your head a little bit
that
more.
was that one, yes.
Yep. See, the moment I say it, you're like, it's that one.
Well, you might remember her from the 1976 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
I mean, remember is a strong word.
Yeah.
Becca.
And the 1977 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Why did they let her be there with her teeth?
I don't know.
She
And
threatened
that's-
to bite them. If
That's
they
literally, and I don't know when this episode is going up. You guys?
This will be going up around early October, probably.
Okay, so yeah, my episode will have already aired on Rodeo Rosie by then. That's what I'm really trying to figure out with that episode is like, why'd they let her into the parade? That's like literally the plot of the episode.
So with Prairie Dawn Companion, which came first, the great name or the great idea for the podcast?
So the great idea for the podcast, well, listen, you said great idea, not me. The great idea for the podcast definitely came first. It was something I'd been toying around for a long time because it's something that really interested me. Was again this sort of like deep dive into the female characters with the Muppets, because there aren't, I mean, Sesame Street does a better job of female characters than the Muppet Show proper.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like it's kind of ridiculous to me as a woman that still it's like, yeah, you got Miss Piggy and Janice sort
Janice
of, although
is
she
there.
mostly acts as a unit with the Electric Mayhem. And then people are like, you know who my favorite female character is? Camilla. And I'm like, you're lying. Camilla is not your favorite character. She's in like 2 things.
Hey,
As you
Hilda's
guys
there.
found.
Hilda's there.
You got Gladys. You got Mildred, all these classic, memorable Muppet characters.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was really interested in that. Weirdly, Hubba Wah really inspired a lot of it because I would have these episodes where I'd use these really obscure things about Betty Lou as trivia questions. And I was like, why is it that I know Betty Lou exists, but like no one else does? And that sort of led to it. The name, I mean, here's the thing. I can't take credit for the name. Both Joe Hennis and Michal Richardson of Muppeturgy both came up with that name independently.
Wow.
That's how you know it's a winner.
For other projects.
Oh.
And I was brainstorming with the two of them. Michal suggested Finding Betty Elusive, which is a real mouthful, and I'm glad I didn't use that.
You also have to somehow figure out in the branding how to get that elusive.
Yeah, like, no, it was a mess.
Oh, I didn't even get it until you just did that.
There you go.
Yeah, it was a mess. But they both suggested it because they were like, well, you know what? We had this name once and we decided we weren't going to do this project. Like they both independently said that. So yeah, the name absolutely came second.
Well, I do want to mention too, you've had some recently... I do want to mention also you've had some recent big guests on that podcast that I feel like are worth mentioning as well if people want to go check it out.
I've had some big guests and you know, I guess that's kind of a misnomer because the thing about Fran Brill is she's actually very small.
And the big shoes she had to wear.
Yeah, she got those big shoes. But no, I had Fran Brill on the 3rd episode of my show, and I had Stephanie DeBruzzo on the 5th episode of my show. And it's been such a delight to get to talk to these real all-stars of the puppetry world. I'm really hoping, you know, season 1's almost over of my show. Season 1 will be over by the time you guys are hearing this episode. But I'm really hoping that season 2 I can get some more really, really big names because there's some people on my list that I really want to talk to and need to just do the legwork of scheduling. And I know you guys can understand that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Scheduling is often scheduling is often tricky when, you know, normally if I tell people, hey, so we record Sunday mornings, they're like, when do you actually record? When can I join you? I'm like, oh, sorry, it is Sunday mornings.
What, you think I'm going to church?
It turns out some people do. Yeah. I always forget.
Wow, I'm looking at Fran Brill's big platform shoes right now, which I didn't know was a thing.
Yeah, they're in the Museum of the Moving Image.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Our Fran Brill's shoes. They're next to Prairie Dawn in the Museum of the Moving Image.
Cool.
I did think that for a while the tagline of my show was going to be, we've got big shoes to fill, but I realized that even fewer people would understand that joke.
Right, like you've got like 4 jokes on top of each other at that point of like a Prairie Dawn companion. Like, yes, people understand Prairie Dawn, but how many of the like diehard Muppet fans have ever listened to Prairie Home Companion or know what it is?
I had to explain to a number of Muppet fans about what that was. And then it's a problem too, because like the host is canceled. Yeah. So like...
Well, speaking of the host,
speaking of hosts who are canceled,
Sam, what did we watch this week?
First, we watched Sesame Street 20 and Still Counting. This primetime special aired on NBC on April 7th, 1989. In it, host Bill Cosby takes us on a tour of Sesame Street, its people, and its history of teaching children all over the world how to count, read, and be kind to each other. Along the way, there are a few different little through lines and stories, like Bob McGrath, Roscoe Orman, and Loretta Long are talking about their time as Bob, Gordon, and Susan. Kermit's out on the street in his reporter outfit, interviewing people about growing up with Sesame Street, and Bert and Ernie are making a little home video of Sesame Street so they can finally see it on TV. Then we watched a fragment of a partially lost documentary called The Sesame Street Experiment. Hosted by Jane Curtin, this documentary seems like it hits a lot of the same beats as 20 and Still Counting, but with a focus more on the research and science behind the show, and has the writers and the producers getting deep about why they do things the way that they do them. The egghead nature of the special, I believe, is due in part to it being created as part of an exhibition celebrating 20 years of Sesame Street at the Museum of Modern Art in New York called Sesame Street, The Next Generation.
Yeah, that one definitely felt a bit more please give us money than 20 and Still Counting, which felt more like a celebration for parents to watch.
Well, I think it was like you're going to sit in this dark room in this museum and watch Jane Curtin tell you about, or like you're going to pass by and see Jane Curtin for a second.
Yeah.
And then a writer of the show will go, we did this the smart way because we're smart and we're
Mhm.
in a museum now.
It's so interesting, both of these specials, to think about like how much they're trying to explain, like, we're Sesame Street. We do things good. Like it starts to almost feel like the lady doth protest too much. And like I know that's not what it is, because I do genuinely believe Sesame Street does good things and does good things using, like, you know, science and data and testing. But it is also like, okay, I get it. I get it. It's a miracle. I get it. You don't have to tell it to me again.
This is also like the 8th one of these that we've watched, I think.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah,
we've watched
got,
a lot of these.
Sesame Street, special. We've got Sesame Street at night, ?
Yeah.
And like so many of these feel like they're just like, hey, you heard of this thing, Sesame Street? Your kids love it.
Good.
It's pretty good.
And like by 1989, here's the thing. People had heard of Sesame Street.
I mean, and this special proves that. They interview adults on the street who are like, oh, yeah, I grew up watching that. My 5-year-old watches it now. I can say the alphabet backwards. Watch this.
Oh, that was the...
I loved all that. Like the part where they're interviewing people. And when Kermit runs into those 2 little girls who were on the show a long time
best
ago.
part of the special,
I was like,
right there.
I was getting choked up, and Jim even seemed like really excited to be talking to them. He was like, those rules.
Yeah.
But like that's what I mean is like it's so weird. And I guess I can't speak to like, did adults realize the show was research driven? But like the idea that like, hey, have you heard of Sesame Street? Feels like such a ridiculous thing to say in 1989.
Right, because the people who conceivably are the parents now are at least in their 20s, if not older. And so, yeah, like this is the generation of parents who grew up watching it themselves, most likely. So the odds that they have not in the past 20 years encountered Sesame Street in some way, pretty slim odds there.
I think like coming at it from the perspective of what we do, Matt, like at Complexly, it's really easy to not realize how hard it is to make stuff and like how much people assume something just kind of magically happens in a way that, like, I don't know, they always just say like there's a curriculum and they don't really ever get into it more than that, which I think would be interesting if there was, and I'm sure things have, but yeah, I think it's nice. It's like when people hear, I think there's always people who need to hear that out there.
Well, and like what Becca was saying about the, you know, the lady doth protest too much part of this, as she was talking about that, I was like, oh yeah, this feels like Complexly to me, because like our work, we often, you know, we are a YouTube production company at the end of the day, and what people know about YouTubers now is Mr. Beast. And so when they hear that like we make videos that are educational on YouTube, they don't necessarily assume, you know, that we're doing this in good faith, or that we have fact checkers or all of this stuff. And so the, you know, we have to go a long way to over explain sometimes. No. All of our work goes into hiring this team of 10 editorial experts who make these videos and write them and all this stuff. And so like, you don't see all the work that goes into producing these things. And so I agree that I think it would be interesting to see more of that. And I think Street Gang, both the book and the documentary, do a really good job of getting into that part. So like, you know, through the years they have gotten into it, but I do see, especially at this point, there's a lot of crappy kids cartoons on TV in the late 80s.
I can think of at least one.
Is it called Muppet Babies?
It is called Muppet Babies.
Yes.
But you know, that is what Sesame Street is competing with at this point for attention.
Yeah.
And so trying to explain to parents like, hey, we also want your kids to learn things. So if they're watching Sesame Street instead of Transformers, maybe they'll learn something.
Yeah. It was Ninja Turtles at this point, Matt. Transformers was long gone.
Yeah, I guess until Beast Wars, but that's later.
When Beast Wars came back, Ninja Turtles was about to dominate everything. Maybe it hadn't quite yet, but yeah.
Well, Beast Wars was my shit. And at that point, I was definitely out of the age I was watching Sesame Street. So sorry, Joan Gans Cooney.
That teaches you stuff, too. You learn about all the different kinds of animals there are.
Yeah. How else am I going to know a cheetah exists? Until I see him be also a robot.
Yeah.
Hey, it's me. He has to talk like that.
He definitely does. He's the cool one.
I know. I was there. But one of the things, and I know we'll get into the specifics of this special, but I was talking to you guys earlier about this, and I do just want to say I'm really excited that I get to be on the first Kermitment episode where you guys talk about the Jim Henson Hour, because this is sort of an episode of the Jim Henson Hour. It was originally intended to be. In the Jim Henson Hour press kit, it's identified as something that will be on the Jim Henson Hour. And I'm not quite sure why it wasn't. It seems like it has to do with release dates, that this was released before the Jim Henson Hour premiered. But technically, this is a Jim Henson Hour episode, and it's an hour long, and Jim introduces it in that same wonderful World of Disney kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to think of it as being part of that world.
When we watch the Jim Henson Hour, will it feel like part of that world? Because this feels just like all the other Sesame Street specials to me.
Will it feel like part of that world? That's a great question, because the Jim Henson Hour's greatest strength and greatest failing and greatest doom is that I don't know what it feels like besides Jim Henson gives you an hour of information.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and that sounds even drier.
He loves
but that
doing
sounds like Jim
though.
Henson's dream.
Hold on, because that's that's what I was just about to say. Let me rephrase that. It's like Jim Henson gives you an hour, and I hate using the word content, but Jim Henson gives you an hour of something to watch. But there was a sense, and one of the things, that I loved about this special, which was, there weren't many things I loved about this special, but there were some. At the end, when they're all singing Sing, and the characters are all labeled with their performers.
Yes, that was great.
Was great. And that is something that happens on every episode of the Jim Henson Hour.
Oh.
Okay.
You guys will see, but in every... literally, like the eye catch before the commercial break, if you think about like an anime has like those eye catches, like who's that Pokemon, is a bunch of TV screens with the different Muppets on them, each labeled with the different performers' names.
Whoa, that's cool.
So one of the big things about the Jim Henson Hour, because it really was Jim's blank check, to use a term from another podcast, it's really Jim's biggest desire, as you guys know, is to really pull back the curtain and be like, here's how the sausage gets made. And the Jim Henson Hour really tries to walk that line. And of course, one of the famous last episodes of it that actually didn't air on TV until years later is the Secrets of the Muppets special, where it is literally just an hour of Jim Henson going like, here's how Gorgs work. So it does in some ways feel like it's part of that world, but in another way, like, what is the world of the Jim Henson Hour is the question of the Jim Henson Hour.
Right. Well, and I think, like this feels like such its own special by itself. And even with the intro by Jim, that being so different than the intros we see on the Jim Henson Hour, I don't think I would watch this and assume it was anything other than what it is. I would never assume that this was supposed to be part of something bigger or something different. This really just feels like a normal PBS Sesame special to me.
Especially because you guys have watched so many of those. And like you said, they're really all the same.
Yeah.
This has some other things, because I think this has the most new material written specifically for this. Like, compared to like Sesame Street at night, this has I'm sorry if I blew out the levels on that one.
You have to blow out the levels when you say
it's
that.
your best Gene
It's
Shalit
part of
impression.
Yeah, it's part of it.
That obviously had Grover and Gene doing some new stuff. But like you said, this has a couple of through lines of new material. And I feel like that distinguishes it slightly. I'm not sure it distinguishes it enough to be, again, to feel like a hugely different thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you get some fun new stuff on this, which, mostly involve Bill Cosby.
Yeah, let's address the elephant in the room here.
His name is Mr. Snuffleupagus, and
you're gonna make this segue so much harder. So there are a few things about this special worth noting before we get into talking about it. In case you hear these and you're like, yeah, maybe I'll skip watching that one along with the commitment crew this time. One, the special does contain some outdated terminology throughout it, so you'll hear some terms that, wouldn't be in a Sesame Street special these days, but do show up in this one. Special is also hosted by Bill Cosby, who is, I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't glamorize him, but thinking back over his career going into this episode of recording is just so wild as a kid born in late 80s, because at the time of this special, he was known as a comedian, TV star. He was America's dad due to his work on The Cosby Show. And he was just literally everywhere in the 80s and 90s, like on every commercial, every TV special. So it makes sense that he would be hosting something like this. These days, he's known as, and for legal reasons, I'll say, an alleged sexual predator who reportedly attacked dozens of women over several decades. Nearly 60 women have come forward with stories about Bill Cosby, and while the majority of those cases have fallen outside the statute of limitations for prosecution, he was found guilty for 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault in 2018 and sentenced to 3 to 10 years in state prison. But then in 2021, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned that conviction, citing violations to his due process rights, which I will not get super into because, one, I'm not a legal scholar and don't know a lot about this. But basically, the previous district attorney had promised him that if he cooperated in a civil suit, that he would not be charged over these specific accusations. He was then charged by a different prosecutor who claimed that he wasn't bound by that agreement. But then the Supreme Court ended up disagreeing. So it's basically a district attorney gave him sort of a shitty deal.
Said, hey, you're famous, right?
Yeah, like, please cooperate here. You might have to settle, pay some money, but we won't prosecute you.
Yeah.
And he was like, deal. And so somebody else later then prosecuted him for that same thing. And so he got out on that weird, legal loophole kind of thing. So while he has paid thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars through lawsuits to various victims, including in 2022, where a civil jury found him guilty of sexually abusing a teenager in 1975, he did have his actual conviction overturned, which I'm sure he touts as a win somehow. But that is Bill Cosby's reputation these days. A very different reputation for this man when he hosted this versus today.
Yeah.
And of course, this is not going to be the last time you guys see Bill Cosby in the context of the Jim Henson Hour. He's not on the Jim Henson Hour, but the Jim Henson Hour is on the Bill Cosby Show.
Yeah,
he has a dream about it or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to watch an episode of the Cosby Show eventually for this podcast. So
I should also note there are allegations against Placido Domingo, who appears in this episode,
right?
In this special as well, as well as a very confusing Snopes article. They needed to go into Snopes for this. But,
So what Becca is talking about is there's a Snopes page called "Did John from Sesame Street End Up on a Sex Offender List?" Which, if you read through it, it seems like yes. Like, it seems like one of those 99% sure situations, but that we cannot say definitively yes. But almost every detail of this man's biography line up with another John Williams on this list. So it's that seems like what has happened to John, but we can't 100% say, yes, that is what happened to John.
But the point is, this special is weirdly fraught in ways that it wasn't even when I watched this for the first time. A couple years after. Obviously, I wasn't alive in 1989. And it's weirdly fraught in ways that we wouldn't have even realized in, 2019. Like,
right.
It's such a weird experience for that reason.
Yeah, just the fact that there are a number of people throughout this who have either allegations publicly against them, have been in criminal cases. So I totally understand if you skip watching this one. But I think maybe briefly first, we could talk a little bit about the not disgraced Jane Curtin and her documentary, The Sesame Street Experiment, because as Sam said, it's mostly a lot of the same stuff that gets covered in the 20 years and counting.
Yeah,
but
for smart people.
But I think there's a couple of things in there worth highlighting. One for me is a beautiful moment with Norman Stiles, where I just wrote down his quote because his performance of it, he's not a man who's normally on camera. So this is his quote. If the parents are laughing and at the same time there's something else going on the kids are enjoying, you know what I mean? That's fine. But if there's nothing for the kids in the bit,
Nuh-uh. That was great. Nuh-uh.
The pause I left in there was like a fifth the length of the pause that he has in the documentary.
Norm Stiles. Norm Stiles is very good at the thing Norm Stiles does.
Yeah.
Norm Stiles was one of the best writers Sesame Street ever had.
It's called writing,
maybe
not talking.
Not the best on camera. Like, you guys talk about Jim Henson being awkward.
Well, I mean, though, like, if you're writing a comedy bit, good job, Norm.
Just how imprecise all of his language was extremely funny for a head writer as well.
It's like he's trying to give himself a catchphrase for the documentary of
They're gonna
and
love
his
this
writing on the
more.
show is good, but but not there. But you know what's so interesting, and so interesting, especially in regards to Sesame Street, sort of again as a whole timeline. So much of this special, and even a bunch of the Bill Cosby special, but it feels like more of this one, like what you guys were just saying with Norm, is so much tied into the idea of co-viewing, which I feel like at this point, especially of the 80s, but even earlier, was so much of what Sesame Street was going for. The idea that kids and adults should be watching it together. And the 80s is really when you started to see even more celebrity appearances. The 80s is also when you get those first dedicated parody segments. Both of these specials highlight Miami Mice. Both of these specials highlight Alistair Cookie, Monster Piece Theater. And those kind of like Sesame Street parodies of adult media programs basically start with Miami Mice. You can argue they were in season 1 as well, like as early as season 1, because there was The Hunt for Happiness, which was a soap opera parody. It was such a key component of the show. And I feel like if I can talk briefly about modern Sesame Street, I know you guys have mentioned tuning in occasionally to the HBO eras of Sesame Street, and I want to choose my words very carefully here. But oftentimes that HBO stuff, you guys on your show, I know Sam in particular, you talk all the time about how Sesame Street is some of the funniest Muppet stuff.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that, again, from like 1969 to 1989, these first 20 years have some of the funniest things the Muppets ever did. But that was because of this drive for co-viewing. And in this HBO era, and slightly before the HBO era as well, and hopefully not also in the Netflix era, but we'll see, so much of the focus is on just making it appeal to kids.
Right.
And so you lose a lot of these more sophisticated jokes and more sophisticated comedy delivery the timing of Grover and Kermit, like they have such good comedy timing, and like you don't necessarily see that today. And I'm not trying to insult the performers or anything, but it's just not what the show is geared towards anymore. And it makes sense because in the 80s, again, like even when I was a kid in the 90s, we had one TV in the house. So if I wanted to watch Sesame Street, my mom was hearing Sesame Street and seeing Sesame Street. I mean, modern Sesame Street is Sesame Street for the iPad generation, not to sound like a crotchety old woman, but like it's Sesame Street for the iPad generation. And if a kid's watching it alone on the iPad, it doesn't matter if there's Miami Mice, because a kid, it doesn't know what a Miami Vice is, Like
a lot of their parents probably don't know what a Miami Vice is.
Well, that's
anymore.
true too. But I mean, like,
I know what you.
I mean, an equivalent.
Totally.
I mean an equivalent.
Yeah.
And like, it's so interesting to me that they stress again and again that that's so important here. Jane Curtin is like, the celebrities are on the show, and my kids loved when I was on the show, but like, adults too can find someone they're excited to see or something like that.
Yeah.
And there are still celebrities on the show, but fewer celebrities are on the show. And like today, it's so interesting to see how things change, again. And Sesame responds to research, and that seems to be what the research is telling them is the right way to make the show. It can be a little disappointing sometimes to me as a 34-year-old woman who does still enjoy Sesame Street, because what I enjoy is watching, these old Jim and Frank sketches and again, great Bert and Ernie comedy routines.
And Gladys the cow. Gladys
the
cracks me
cow.
up every time. I love Gladys. The thing that it really, well, like you're saying that there aren't celebrities, which is totally true, but they still do make a lot of adult content that ends up like on YouTube, or their guests, like the puppets are guest stars on different shows and stuff like that. So it's so they have like the arm that reaches out to the parents to say, make your kids watch Sesame Street. Doesn't have to be integrated with the stuff for kids anymore, which it
feels like they're doing that just so that the parents will share it on social media and bring attention to things.
Exactly.
Brett Goldstein being there is like, that's for the parents, but they're not necessarily going to do a full-on HBO episode that's focused on
where Brett Goldstein
shows.
shows up as his character and he's like kicking the soccer ball around, and all the Sesame Street guys are like, wow, it's that famous soccer guy.
Jonathan Van Ness was on last month. I wrote about that on Tough Pigs.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think there is, when we talk about the following trends or doing research, one of the, we're talking about feeling like grumpy old people sometimes. One of my least favorite things is when I hear people say that they're changing content up or doing something different because, people today just have smaller attention spans and they can't focus and they're iPad kids. And it's like, well, right, but you're not helping things by leaning into that. And so it's actually, you can still make better, longer things that actually force people to focus and help their attention span. You don't just give in to this assumption that they can't watch something for longer than 15 seconds.
Well, kind of the original point of Sesame Street partially was also that it was for the attention span of the average TV watcher, which was
right. That's the thing, is Sesame Street was an hour long, but it was also fast segments about the number 2. So I can see that either way, but it is this interesting thing and something that we talk about, that I've spoken to people about and thought about a lot with a Prairie Dawn companion, plug. But like, there's so many, there's data that's like, boys don't want to watch shows about girls. So obviously there's fewer female Muppets than male Muppets. Mm-hmm. But there's a part of me that's like, well, if Sesame Street wants to teach and change the world and all of these things, to an extent, shouldn't they be pushing for things that maybe aren't, are out of data? Like, if data says kids have shorter attention span, couldn't we try to do something to help them focus longer. I don't
Yeah.
know. And I'm not, again, I don't work for Sesame Street. And like I said, I want to choose my words carefully. But like, it's so interesting to me to think about this stuff because so much of this special is about, look at all the cool research we do. And
That's such an interesting point, because there are a couple moments in this, maybe a misguided moment from Joan Gans Cooney about like playing the long game and being like, someday we're going to bring peace to the Middle East because of Sesame
oh my God,
Street.
yeah, that not to.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get political on this podcast.
You can.
But that kind of broke my heart to just be like,
totally,
Joan.
But
Joan.
even
Bad news for you, 1989, Joan
even like
Ganscooney.
with
It's not gonna get better, Joan.
with like Fraggle Rock, I think we made fun of Jim for being like, this show's gonna solve war. But then it's like, well, yeah, maybe like a generation when those kids grow up, they will have a different viewpoint on things. It's just like the long game.
Yeah.
And maybe a way that Sesame Street isn't as interested in playing that long game anymore and looking like what are these kids going to grow up into?
Because like, I think you can highlight something that has changed from this era of Sesame Street that clearly was something that they were making a decision about back then, where in this special, the Jane Curtin one, Jim talks about how, like, very purposefully, the Muppets are not particular races. Like, he's like, we have a blue monster, a green monster, whatever. And so they're sort of touting that as like a purposeful choice to show kids that, like, look, it doesn't matter if you're blue or green or orange. But one, that has changed now on more modern Sesame Street, but also it sort of feels like it's ignoring the fact that the humans on Sesame Street were purposefully like a diverse cast, both in many ways. And I think like they talk a little bit about that, I think, at the end of the Bill Cosby one, but it's interesting to sort of not necessarily acknowledge those two things coexisting of like, well, we did this with the Muppets so that kids see this, but we also did this with the humans so that kids see this.
Yeah. But I feel like Jim, I don't know if you guys know this, but like Jim likes talking about Muppets. And,
That's true.
I've heard.
When Jim appears on specials, he's going to say something about the Muppets.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
and it does just feel like it's like Jim doesn't even care about Bob and Susan.
Yeah.
And like that feels like a mean thing to say, but Jim's like, let me tell you guys about our puppet characters.
Well, yeah, he's never really with them. Like he's
Not
never
really.
on the street with
a
them.
little bit in like the first two seasons.
Yeah.
But
Jim, much like I was when I was a kid, just assumes that those are their real names. He's like, hey, Luisa Maria, how's it going? He's like, Jim, we've met many times. My name is Sonia. He's like, yeah, whatever.
I think that is an interesting point though, Matt, especially because like Matt Robinson and Loretta Long, like that seems so important to them that there were those role models of like
early
black
on,
role
like
models and Loretta Long talks about it, and she even is kind of like, and then I found out there was a bunch of puppets in it. It's like, I guess it was maybe.
I guess I'm not the star of this show. There's a big
you
bird.
you guys know this. I know you guys know this, but like that wasn't the original point of the show. When like originally the humans were going to be fully separate. The Muppets were only going to live in the segments.
Right.
So it was something that presumably Loretta Long had to realize was that she was going to have to actually talk to Big Bird.
Big Bird's going to be
this
here
guy
now.
Carol's been hanging out a lot more lately. Just if anyone else hasn't noticed that, I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to Carol hasn't left. Is that a problem? I did like that they credit Jim as the Muppet originator in the Jane Curtin special. And I also liked that clearly, as far as like following trends and data, you can, at the end of that special, Joan Gans Cooney pivots to talking about the importance of teaching daycare providers about watching Sesame Street and about how kids shouldn't just be wandering around and playing, but that like educational TV is also important.
And what we will see in the 90s is daycare becomes a more important component of the Sesame Street stories.
Interesting.
So Jamal had a daycare, and then Gina, and then it will keep going. There's things, Monsters in Daycare with Harry Monster becomes a recurring segment, and Ernie's Show and Tell is really daycare themed, which is well into the 90s. If you've seen the clip of the guy from Abbott Elementary with Ernie looking at a computer, that's from Ernie's Show and Tell. Daycare becomes an element, and it's always interesting to sort of see these. see Joan say these kind of things in specials, and then me having this sort of long view picture to be like, yeah, Frazzle and Natasha were in daycare in the 90s. Like, and realizing that that's, again, it's clear that was on her mind. We talk on my show that there was an article in the New York Times where they spoke to Dulcie Singer about why there weren't enough female characters on Sesame Street. And Dulcie Singer is like, we're working on it. And then literally 2 years after that article was published is when Zoe first appears on the show. So like you sit there and you're like, yep, that they said it. And then 2 years later it happened. And you're seeing that with the daycare stuff too, where it's like, they're saying that daycare is a more important part of kids' lives. And then like 2 years later, daycare is a part of the Muppets' lives.
That's interesting.
Well, and yeah, I wonder, obviously following trends and data, it's like now you're not going to find a TV in a daycare, most likely.
No.
Like daycares are not going to include TV watching as a part of the daily curriculum for kids. And so Sesame Street, again, has to compete with a change in, sensibilities when it comes to parents of, sometimes kids have iPads, but other times parents are just, my kid doesn't get screen time. So that's probably a really hard place to, thread that needle if you're making a Sesame Street.
Did you watch TV in daycare? I remember watching TV in daycare. But I think we watched like G.I. Joe and stuff. We just watched.
See, this is what Joan Ganscooney is trying to combat.
She wouldn't have liked that.
Watching TV in daycare, also going to be an important theme on the Jim Henson Hour, as you will see.
Wow. Okay.
What a weird idea. I'm trying to figure out how that might make sense, but
it is referenced at least once, possibly twice.
Wow, is it Jim saying, please put this tape in for your kids? Someone needs to watch this show.
Do you want me to spoil?
No, I want to wait and find it.
Yeah. We want to be like, oh, that's what Becca was telling us about.
Hey, now we know.
You're gonna see a character who's obviously one of my favorites, and you'll know who it is immediately. Who talks about watching the Muppets in daycare.
I'm so excited. Okay.
Well, and let's talk about this Sesame Street 20 and Still Counting. It is sort of what these other specials we've talked about in the past should have been, as far as montages, and I think appropriately leaning into the nostalgia and honoring the past of the show. I think bringing in the former child actors who appeared on the show is a
so
lovely
nice.
touch.
Best part. I said that earlier, but it's the best part.
Yeah, they bring in Fanny and Shala, who are just like adults walking down the street, start talking to Kermit, and they're like, hey, Kermit, we go way back. We know you from like 16 years ago. Yeah.
I love that.
I think also interesting, I looked up to okay, this is where Fanny and Shala were in 1989. Where are they now?
Did you find anything out?
Yeah, well, half, because Fanny couldn't find anything about Fanny. So, presumably she finished up at the University of Pennsylvania, majored in marketing, and was successful in that. But who knows?
A regular Don
Shala,
Draper, perhaps.
Yeah. Inspiration for Mad Men, really, is what we're getting at here.
Hey, hold on. Was Don Draper not next to some people on Mad Men?
Yes, he was always, there was always other people back there.
Yeah, so,
there was
so
always,
they were inspired by Shala.
Yeah.
There was always young women he wasn't married to that he was next to.
Exactly.
But Shala Lynch was the sophomore at University of Texas on the track team, who was going to go to the Olympics in 2000, but had a back injury, so did not go to the Olympics. So she pivoted, worked at Ken Burns' production company for a while, and is still a filmmaker and director focused on documentary. Just this year, in March, she had a new documentary come out on Apple TV Plus called Number One on the Call Sheet, which is a 2-part documentary focused on the experience of leading Black actors in Hollywood. The first part is centered on Black men, and the part 2 is focused on Black women, and she directed that part of it. So
cool.
Yeah. Still out there
That's
doing
so cool.
Yeah.
And she's also done some interviews in the past, handful of years where Sesame Street does get brought up as like, hey, you're the person from Sesame Street. And she's like, she seems like she's still like, she doesn't brush it off and say, I'm not here to talk about that. She has fond memories of it. She talks about it very kindly.
I mean, it's pretty easy when you were only on it like once, maybe. And
she was on there
looks
a bunch of
like
times.
6 times.
Yeah.
In those, she wasn't like a kid on the street. She was always talking.
No, she was.
She was.
They reused
Oh.
those kids for everything back then.
Yep.
Okay. I thought maybe she was just in those segments where the puppet was talking to him, but she
No,
was
and
running
same deal.
around.
Same deal with John John too. And I should say,
Oh.
we get to see John John reunite with Harry Monster, and I will tell you that was one of 2 times yesterday when I was watching this that I cried.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I've seen this special before. Granted, I'm very emotional. It's the hormones, but I did cry when Harry is like, "Look at you, you're all grown up,"
Yeah.
you know, and you're in the Air
man.
Force.
No,
and then
there's a reason that clip gets shared so often when people
Yeah.
post that online, because it is such a sweet clip to think about and bring back, the kids from the show.
And the old John John clip is really special. Just that
I
yeah.
was obsessed with that clip as a little kid. My family used to count like John John when we would count.
Yeah.
My dad probably still, if there's like 15 of something, will go 15 in the same way that John John does.
My favorite part of like any of those puppet segments, because obviously we've talked about the QR Cookie Monster thing that they show in this
They
one.
show it in this, yeah.
But like that clip and the John John clip are very popular, and I think what people don't necessarily, the people who aren't the kind of people we are, who watch those clips and just enjoy them for being sweet, but what we get out of them, I think, is looking at the improvisation from puppeteers in those moments, because of the unscripted nature of kids and what the heck they're going to do. In both of those, it's just this completely unfiltered, either saying the alphabet and pivoting to Cookie Monster and Jim's fantastic reaction to that. Or in this, you have a kid who starts out counting perfectly normal, and Harry Monster is just, Jerry Nelson doing a great job here, just being like 1, 2, and then somewhere around 12, 13, this kid's just like, all right, let's change it up a little bit. 13! And Harry Monster's like, here we go, 14. And like, had Jerry Nelson tried to sort of like rein the kid in and keep it counting normal, that clip is not as timeless, and everyone knows it now.
Well, so much of, in my real life, I'm an educator. And so much of what we talk about in education is like meeting the kids where they're at. And I think Sesame Street does such a nice job of that. And that's exactly it. That Harry Monster isn't like, no, John, you got to do it like this. Like, it's like, no, you know what? He's still counting to 20. He can do it however he wants. And the thing that I think Jerry Nelson was so good at in that Harry Monster John sketch is the times when John doesn't know the number, and the sort of gentle encouragement that Harry offers. And then there's one point where Harry like whispers the number and John's like, oh, and then says it, like, but Harry waits. He doesn't just immediately tell John the answer. I love all of that. It's something that I really respect as, again, someone who in my real life, when I'm not podcasting about the Muppets, I'm a teacher.
Do you feel like, I don't want to drag New Sesame Street into this again too much, but do you feel like it does a good job of meeting kids where they're at? Or,
I would assume so, to an extent, but I feel like there's less time to be messy on New Sesame Street, because New Sesame Street is very fast paced. So there's less time for those sort of subtleties of these moments of like dealing with difficulty and stuff. There are episodes about it, like episodes like, Elmo gets this wrong, or the Count is mortified that he got something wrong. But it's a little different because everything is much faster, more to the point, and more focused. And I sort of feel like the kind of more amblingness of early Sesame Street allows for a little more realism to it. Whereas modern Sesame Street is very glossy and constructed. And obviously that's something that I like less about it, because I love the roughness of, again, like the 50s and 60s Muppet stuff. Again, like...
Right.
Java is one of my favorite things the Muppets ever did, type thing. But like, you don't see that sort of naturalism, because there are no like ad-libbed kids on the show anymore. Again, you don't have diverse kids. You have the diverse, you have Gabrielle and Tamir and Ji Young, and I do enjoy those characters, but like, Tamir isn't going to count like that because there's no way you can script that. You know what I mean? Like
scripted messiness is not actual messiness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the most recent thing that I feel like has this energy that I've seen is something that I don't think a lot of people have watched. From 2015, Disney did these Muppet Moments.
I've watched it.
Well, of course you have. I'm saying, when I say most people, I mean not people like us, Becca.
I was writing for Tough Pigs at the point.
But the Muppet Moments are the closest thing to this energy that has come out in, recent times, where it is these relaxed ad-lib moments with kids and random Muppets, and just seeing unscripted kids have to interact with Bobo or Pepe or the newsman is a lot of fun. And I think they're all on Disney Plus, or they're at least all on YouTube or something.
They're on Disney Plus. Yeah, they're on Disney Plus. Also, Muppet Babies Playdate, if you haven't watched that, but that is the same concept, but with the Muppet Babies puppets.
Okay. I have not watched those ones.
Mm-hmm. Those should also be on Disney Plus.
But check those out. It's also worth noting that this special you see at the very end is dedicated to Joe Raposo, who had actually just died a couple months before the special came out in February of 1989. So this is the first thing we're watching in our timeline that is a post Joe Raposo thing. But he did contribute a fantastic original song to this special called "What a Bird."
Not saying that What a Bird isn't fantastic, but I gotta correct you here and say that Raposo contributed 2 fantastic original songs to this special. Or rather, let me rephrase. Joe Raposo contributed 2 songs to this special. One fantastic and one that I got up and started folding my laundry.
Which one is which?
Wait.
I enjoyed What a Bird. It's been stuck in my head all day. Look through the window. I literally got up, asked my spouse, did people in the 80s like opera? And my spouse was not convinced that they did, but Joe Raposo did write that song.
It's like the last vestiges of like the variety show television or something like that. There is a lot of opera in this time period, though. You're right.
What's interesting, I mean, like, Placido Flamingo, who is a character I enjoy, but part of why I enjoy Placido Flamingo is, first of all, Richard is just such a funny performer.
Yeah.
Truly the funniest of the performers, especially on Sesame Street. Yeah. Again, like you were saying about Gladys the Cow, like my MVP, I mean, my MVP is Prairie Dawn, but my second place might be Gladys the Cow.
Dawn so much. Yeah.
But he comes from, in part, Richard Hunt genuinely loved opera. Like, that was like a genuine passion of Richard Hunt. I don't know if that means that the average kid in the 80s loved opera, but Richard Hunt did.
Yeah. Well, and also Placido feels like it is one of those things where it's an acknowledgement of the sort of pretentiousness of opera. It is a caricature. It is some satire on the people who are normally the people you think of who are into opera. And so Placido plays that up, and people essentially make fun of him a little bit for that. And that's what's been so nice about seeing him on various PBS specials and things that he's done, where he is going into the world of the opera snob.
Oh, and they love it so much.
Oh, they love it every time.
Yes, they've applied so hard for Placido Flamingo.
But yes, I will agree that out of the 2 songs that were created for this special, What a Bird stands out way, way, way above the 2 Placidos.
I think it's a funny song for Big Bird to sing about himself. I feel like somebody else should have sang that song about Big Bird.
It would have been fun if Snuffy sang it.
Yeah.
I did think it was weird.
You gotta support yourself sometimes. You gotta be your own cheerleader.
It's like,
I did think it was weird that there were no clips from Big Bird in China or Big Bird in Japan in that montage. There are clips from Big Bird in Japan in the Jane Curtin special.
Right.
I thought it was weird. I don't know if that's a licensing thing.
Yeah,
I also do just want to, looping back to the Richard Hunt and opera thing, I want to share this quote because I love it. When Being Elmo, the Kevin Clash documentary, screened at the Museum of the Moving Image, and this quote's on Muppet Wiki, somebody in the audience asked Elmo what it was like to work with Richard Hunt, referring to the years, the short time where Richard Hunt was performing Elmo. And Elmo apparently said, it was torture. Elmo doesn't like opera.
Oh no.
Elmo doesn't like tuna fish sandwiches and Schweppes ginger ale. Elmo doesn't like any of those things.
Oh
But for
no.
some reason, when he, referring to Richard, when Richard was working with Elmo, Elmo was motivated to love those things. So I always loved that.
That's so weird. The weird thing, like the weirdest part of the Placido Flamingo conversation to me was when he kept saying, "It's my namesake."
Yes,
That
that
made
was
me
so
have
weird.
too many questions in my head of like, how aware is he that he is a caricature of this man?
This whole thing has that don't think too hard about this moment energy, because it feels like there's a lot of ideas that came together to make this thing, and all those ideas weren't talking to each other, because you have the Hooper store sections where, you have the three actors sitting down to discuss the roles of Bob, Gordon, and Susan.
I liked that.
That's great. I love it. But then
the context is so different.
Yeah, that's true.
In every other part of this, everyone's still making Sesame Street and is like living on the street.
Right.
Especially the moment that broke me was you have when Bert and Ernie are making their own Sesame Street. One, we have Bert and Ernie here not knowing they're on Sesame Street, not knowing they're on a television show.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's already separate from the Bob conversation. But then the moment where they are directing Luis and Maria to fix a toaster because that's what they would want to see on Sesame Street. In this moment, you hear Maria say something like, "Let's just do it, honey." Da-da-da-da-da. So this is Luis and Maria.
Oh,
this is not Emilio and
through
Sonia.
The looking glass. You're right.
So if they there's like a dividing line between Hoopers and the rest of Sesame Street right now, where inside Hoopers is reality, and then outside Hoopers is still Sesame Street. Because
and then there's
somehow,
Bob, who's Bob in both worlds.
He's a day walker.
Yeah, a realm walker. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd think Bert and Ernie would know that Sesame Street is on TV, though.
Yeah.
Because
I fools watch TV all the time.
Well, they were in the original pitch reel. Like, they were on that...
And they were on the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
I guess on the Muppet Show, they did say, like, the nose trick works on Sesame Street, but not on television. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's best not to think too hard about this.
Well, in
but
Muppet Family Christmas, they talk about being on public television, I think, right? And Big Bird's already said he's on public television in the Muppet movie.
Right.
No, it's a very interesting line. And I think that's one of the things that also, again, I'm not also trying to drag HBO series Sesame, but I think to me, the fact that we can ask that question and feel like somehow Sesame is a real place in this era is not a feeling I get from modern day Sesame Street, because it so often is in front of an animated backdrop, or in this place I have no context for where we are, and there's not a feeling like this is a living, breathing street where suddenly Gordon and Suze are going to walk around the corner, or Barkley's going to run into frame, or like it does not feel like a place anymore. It feels like a backdrop for Elmo to talk to me.
The interesting thing so much about Sesame Street, or at least, again, early Sesame Street, is Sesame Street is a surprisingly like realistic and grounded show that also has monsters and a talking bird on it.
Right.
And I'm not sure I feel that way now. And like there gets to be a point where there's more and more episodes with like fairy tale characters on the street itself. Whereas in the earlier episodes, it was usually only in segments, or Bob would read a book. And that kind of gets to a head with the introduction of Abby Cadabby, who's a character who I like in the abstract. And Leslie does such a fabulous job performing her. But once you get to the point where Abby can literally like control fundamental elements of the universe and change the seasons, then you're no longer dealing with a show where it's like, and Gordon's going to adopt a baby.
It's like Abby can make a baby appear out of thin air. Here you go, Gordon. You want 5 more babies? Boom, boom, boom. Here you go.
They've made a dark pact with Abby Cadabby.
So and I know I'm not supposed to think about it this way, but we're on a podcast, so we kind of have to.
Yeah.
But so it is weird when Placido is like, he's my namesake. It reminds me of in the first episode of The Muppet Show, where it's like, and we made a Muppet of you. And
Yes,
it's like,
terrifying.
you can do that?
What does that mean? What happens to them after this is over?
Well, and what is the life of that Muppet? Like, does it have to coexist with that human now? Is it
Does it-
attached to, like,
does it have
if
all
we
your
get more than
memories?
100 feet away, I die? It's sort of like the end of Muppet Family Christmas, where
I was just about to say it's a Maury and the Mink situation.
yeah, Piggy is given a mink, and what is that mink's life? Will it eventually be turned into a coat? Does it know that about itself?
It's
Who
just gonna
knows?
drape across her shoulders like the thing in Ghostbusters 2, you know? It's gonna be fine. She's gonna be fine.
Oh, the other thing about the Bob Gordon Susan moment was Roscoe Orman acknowledging that, like, well, I've only been here 15 years.
Yeah.
Which also feels like a bit of, like, you know, for some kids going like, wait a minute, what does that mean?
Well,
There was-
even like
Gordon
some
was
people,
here.
they don't even really explain that necessarily. Like, I guess you don't have to explain it too much, but it does mean
No.
something different to us than it does to the people listening who are
Right,
like,
but
oh,
like
he
when
must have
Roscoe
been-
Orman
yeah.
showed up on Sesame Street, he didn't say like, hey, I'm here now.
Yeah.
Like, it's different.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, just the line between, you know, what's real, what's not, who knows what's currently going on, who knows they're making a documentary, who thinks this is just everyday life on Sesame Street, is just a little weird and confusing. But again, we're only thinking about it this hard because we're on
But
a
that's all right.
podcast.
But
And you're gonna see even more of this as time goes on. I'm thinking right now of one of my favorite Sesame Street anniversary specials, Elmo Palooza in 1999, 10 years from
Oh.
now, where the Sesame Street gang has a Radio City music hall show about Elmo's like, we're celebrating the songs of Sesame Street. But there's no acknowledgement that they're on a TV show usually. And like Gordon and Susan and everyone are in a limousine. And like it's not explained that they're actors. They're just like a high school science teacher and the person who runs Hooper's store in a limousine to go to Radio City for songs that we sing
Right.
on our street.
There's no acknowledgement of why they have earned this opportunity.
Correct. Now, you see this also, I mean, in the 50th special, where they're like, we're celebrating 50 years of Sesame Street, but that seems to be phrased as like 50 years that it's been a street.
Right. And not this television show you are currently watching.
But
Wow.
at the end of the day, you got to repeat to yourself that it's just a show and you should really, really just relax.
Well,
and my favorite part actually of the special, the part that made me laugh the hardest was when Big Bird is talking to Bill Cosby about how Bill Cosby's like, you've been around for 20 years. How come you're still 6? And Big Bird goes, just lucky, I guess.
Great line.
Yeah.
Great line. I guess in theory, the real highlight should be all of the new Kermit and Grover and also
Yeah.
brief Kermit and Don music segments.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I thought
Brief
these were
is, yeah. Very,
I thought
very
these
brief.
were fine. I wish I liked them more.
I can always appreciate the moment that Kermit sees Grover and he's just like, oh my fucking God, this guy again.
Well, I did love too. You guys talk about how Grover is such a Hollywood type.
Uh-huh.
And Kermit's like, we're doing this for television. And Grover loses his mind.
He also doesn't believe him at first, which would make me again go, wait a minute. So in this world, Grover knows Kermit, but the fact that Kermit could be on TV is like, no, you're not on TV.
I think
It's
Grover
like,
always
okay.
expects the very least from Kermit. You know, Kermit's not
Fair,
exciting.
like,
yeah.
That does feel like maybe a Grover thing. But
Yeah.
Grover is so psyched that this means he might be on TV.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, instantly saying hi to his mom. I do love, we've referenced this a number of times, but this is one of those where it's really highlighted that Grover is the Kirk from Gilmore Girls of Sesame Street,
Yeah.
where he is just random job of the week. And in this, we see him with 3 or 4 different jobs just in one special.
He's making his furry little blue living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great line.
Yeah.
He does seem very indignant when Kermit is like, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm working, asshole.
I have a job. You're a big
Yeah.
TV star. I have to be a construction worker.
Yeah. You take all the money, okay? I have to sell ice cream to make a living. again, not saying like the other ones are bad, but that first one is so good with the ice cream sales and then it turning into the Fanny and Shala appear, that every time we got another one of those, I was like, oh, maybe another kid
what
from the
cool
show
person
will
is he
show
gonna
up.
talk to next?
Yeah, or like someone else will walk
maybe
up
James
and this will
Earl
turn into
Jones
something.
will pop up.
He's also selling ice cream.
Yeah.
It is interesting also, I guess this is a good time to mention, and I don't know if you guys saw this on Muppet Wiki, but the original plan for this special was so much more ambitious.
It always is.
I'm seeing here, it was originally called Around the World in 40 Winks, which is confusing for a 20th anniversary special.
Yeah.
But Bill Cosby was a straggler on a New York City tour group. Ernie wakes up in a sleepwalk state. Bill Cosby's tour bus travels around the world to Kuwait, Russia, Italy, and the Grand Canyon, with Grover doing a job in each location.
Okay.
C is for Cookie was going to be performed throughout the special, including by James Earl Jones. They were going to have other celebrities. Rubber Ducky was going to be sung by Mick Jagger or Cyndi Lauper. And Raul, Julia, and Dionne Warwick were going to do a duet of Sing in English and Spanish. I don't know how they thought they were going to get all of that done, but it does seem like there was more for, like you were saying, like it sometimes feels like the Grover sketches could have gone further. It definitely feels like that was originally part of the intention. It definitely feels like there was originally supposed to be more cool people who would just show up.
But I think all that being said, this was, I think, Matt, you kind of said this a little bit. This was one of the funner one of these to watch.
Yes.
Like especially coming off of Sesame Street at night, which was so boring.
Can you be more confused that Sesame Street exists at night? Can you take that again?
Sesame Street at night?
There we go.
I forgot to be confused about it.
Perfect. That's a wrap.
But yeah, this one was funner to watch. It was more focused. It was more, it felt more celebratory of Sesame Street and less just like, even though there was a bunch of moments where he was like, "There's a curriculum," it felt more holistically like fun and celebratory.
Yeah, and I think the moments with Grover and Kermit are obviously always going to do that, because when you stick Jim and Frank together, it's always going to shine.
Right.
Especially because, we are not seeing a ton of Frank doing a lot of like consistent Muppet things at this time. Like he's off doing directing and other things and just not really showing up as often. So,
wait until you get to the Jim Henson hour.
Right, yeah, like that we don't see a lot of Frank. And so it feels like we take this for granted when we get it sometimes, because it's so classic Sesame to have Grover and Kermit doing these things.
Yeah.
But there's a very cute photo of the two of them during the filming of this on Muppet Wiki too, where they look like they're having a great time.
Yeah.
And it just shows also Frank holding the bottom of the jackhammer prop that they would have used and gives you some insight into how they would have had to puppeteer that, where he would have been puppeteering the top of Grover, but then moving the jackhammer with his left hand.
I mean, if I can ask you real quick, because this is important, because this special was some of your first introductions to some Muppet characters. Mm-hmm. One in particular, I know you don't do this segment anymore, but the Muppet of the week is Baby Natasha, and I'm so curious what you guys think of Baby Natasha, because I'm going to be real with you. She's one of my favorite Muppets. That's
very interesting to me. We have seen Baby Natasha once before.
You have? Okay, I apologize.
Yeah. We saw her only one time, I think, and she was hanging out with Telly, and I think me and Matt were both just like, whose baby is this? Why they're just a random baby?
I think my memory of Baby Natasha, like I remember enjoying Baby Natasha as a kid watching Sesame Street, but my understanding of Baby Natasha forever was that Baby Natasha was Telly's little sister. That is who I thought Baby Natasha was. And then learning that Baby Natasha was just a random baby with no parents for a while.
Correct. Her parents show up later.
Yeah, is much more confusing.
Not usually how babies work.
Now, what you're confused about is that Telly's sister is Mona, and the puppet for Mona would be used as Natasha's mother, Ingrid. in the 90s. So that's obviously why you
That's
were confused as a
obviously-
child.
Exactly. I was like, wait a minute, something says Telly here. I think it's more that their fur is the same
No,
color,
I'm-
and they were in
I'm-
scenes together at some point, and my baby brain was like, I don't care.
Her dad kind of looks like Telly too.
Yeah, like a haggard, like tired Telly.
Yeah.
If that's even possible to make a more haggard, more tired, exhausted-looking Telly.
Yeah.
And you've got some other appearances. Ruby Monster shows up to sing, but there's nothing interesting to say about Ruby Monster.
Why do you love Baby Natasha so much, though?
Baby Natasha's one of the funniest Muppets, in my opinion.
Okay.
I think
You're right. Baby Natasha doesn't give like a shit about anybody else on Sesame Street. It often seems like, and Baby Natasha is just like, what is happening? Who are these
Baby
freaks?
Natasha has the funniest expressions and truly just does not care. I mean, what it really comes down to is Kevin Clash is having so much fun being Baby Natasha. It's so clear, and Baby Natasha is just pure chaos. There's definitely, I mean, is she that funny in this? No, but is there good Baby Natasha stuff to come? Absolutely. And Matthew, you're a new parent. So I'm going to send you a particular Baby Natasha sketch that you are going to immediately connect to. And I have a friend who's a parent who literally, without me even sending this sketch to him, was like, every time this song gets stuck in my head all the time because it's what I think of with my child. The song is "Oh, Look What Our Baby Can Do." And it's Natasha's parents getting excited about Natasha doing the most boring and mundane things while Bob just stands in the background rolling his eyes.
Hoping Linda doesn't get ideas.
So there's fun stuff, but I didn't realize I forgot that you guys had seen her earlier. And here I was like, wow, we got a new Muppet. No, we didn't. You're right.
Yeah, I think we talked about her maybe, but I also don't know that we've seen a ton of her, but we definitely mentioned her at some point. But I do think I'm excited to watch that song because that is very much the life of a new parent, is one like, holy crap, my baby can grab things a little bit now. But also this idea of one things we've already noticed about our daughter is her accidental comedic timing is amazing. And so she will have these moments where, I'll walk out, my wife will be holding her and she'll be like, hey, look, it's daddy. And she'll let out the loudest old man burp you've ever heard, like right in my face. And I'm like, cool. Awesome. That's a nice reception.
That's the Baby Natasha experience.
Yes. And
yeah, I mean, again, I think other than that, though, this special is fine. It's the kind of thing that, if you're not going to watch it because of Bill Cosby, you know what? You're not really missing anything. You're really not.
Especially if you grew up on Sesame Street, you've enjoyed Sesame Street things. If you just want to go back and watch like best of clips shows kind of things, you're going to get the same experience. You're going to get these, the joy of that. As we mentioned, the Kermit and Grover things are good. They're not all timers.
No, they're not. Nowhere near the heights of the Grover the Salesman stuff that I know you guys love so much.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested kind of in a fusion of these two things that we watched, and maybe something more like the Jim Henson Hour might do, where we are spending more time talking to the human hosts of it, and we are getting a little bit, I don't know, there's like the behind the scenes stories are so interesting. Or I guess like the sicko in me really wants to be like, tell me why Telly doesn't have, like, what's the deal with Telly not being addicted to television anymore? Or like, what happened to that Sam the robot or whatever? Like, I want to know all that.
Well,
all
I think
the dirt.
Yeah, getting back into like there's so many different things. You think about the different parts of this, and I would want to watch an hour of Bob, Roscoe, and Loretta sitting there talking about the show.
Yeah.
For, about how it's been for 20 years. I would watch an hour of Jim and Joan Gans Cooney just talking for an hour about the history of Sesame Street. And so it's like all these different pieces are great, but when you have to whittle them down or chip parts out, it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's something, but it's not the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
So I will also say, in the 30th anniversary, there's also the Sesame Street Unpaved special,
right,
which is going to do a lot more of what you want. Because that special is there's montage elements as well, but it's Sonia, Bob, Carol, couple other people, Loretta Long and Marty Robinson sitting around a table and talking about different things that happened to them while making Sesame Street. I'm so sorry. I feel like I came on this show and now all I'm doing is being like, just wait, guys, here's something else you haven't seen. But
you know what that's called? That's called keeping people around. They're going to stay
Yes.
subscribed so that 10 years from now, when we're watching Sesame Street Unpaved, they'll be like, aha, I remember when Becca was talking about that.
Yeah.
You know what I also realized is in the beginning you plugged that I should describe my room. I have a lot of Muppet stuff in my room. I want to just, there we go. End of comment. But what's so interesting about this special, and why I think this one is maybe more important than so many other ones, although it's still skippable. But 1989 is the end of an era for Sesame Street. And I started talking to you guys a little bit about this off mic. 1989 is the end of an era for most Muppet things, because Jim Henson dies in 1990.
Right.
But Sesame Street is not really the same in the 90s. And it's not entirely because of Jim Henson's death, because I feel like sometimes we oversell how important Jim Henson was to Sesame Street. I am the kind of person who, when Bill Cosby tells Natasha and is like, Joan Gans Cooney is Sesame Street's mother and Jim is Sesame Street's father, I was like, well, that's kind of selling like John Stone short.
Yeah.
But can Sesame Street have many fathers? 3 men and a baby. But for a variety of reasons in the 90s, Sesame Street is very different. And partly that is in response to the many other kids' educational shows. You know, a lot has been said about the show responding to Barney, which obviously is going to become something that they have to consider soon. So up through 1989 is sort of this, and I don't want this to sound like a judgment thing, because there's a lot of stuff in the 90s I personally love, but it's this pure Sesame Street of like Sesame Street as an extension of what it was in the 60s, right? Like it hasn't, it's changed since the 60s in many ways, but also in many ways it hasn't. And in the 90s, we're going to start to get major shifts to the set, major set redesigns. We're going to get about 30 new characters all introduced in one season.
Wowza.
And
why? That's so many. You don't have to do that.
Well, hold on. Have you ever wondered what would happen if a fish wanted to explore Sesame Street?
Now you're talking.
Because I got a character for you. Have you ever realized that monkeys like bananas?
This one, yes, I will say I have realized.
Okay, because I got 2 characters for you.
No, two.
Wow.
I think one would do.
But the point is, like, I don't want to sound too negative here, but the show really will start to change after Jim's death, and not just because Jim isn't around. Although Jim's not around, Frank's not around, and Richard's not around, it does get very different from that alone. But it's going to be different now. And it's going to be different. And this is in a weird way that no one could have known, really like the end of what I kind of consider Sesame Street's golden age. And it's interesting to see those montages here, to see all of the characters at the end and be like, things are going to change. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. And I don't want to sound that negative. And I grew
You're
up
saying it's all downhill from here for us on Commitment.
Yeah,
right? Everything
aren't going
good
to
we've
enjoy-
ever watched is in the past.
But like, listen, guys, how many episodes have you joked about Elmo on the Rosie O'Donnell show? And let me tell you, that stuff is funny because Kevin Clash is good at ad-libbing.
Mhm.
But Rosie O'Donnell on the Elmo show, Elmo on the Rosie O'Donnell show, that's right ahead, guys. Like, it's 1989.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
That's
you say
true.
right ahead.
oh yeah,
like-
in the way you guys podcast, you'll be there in 6 years.
Yeah.
But-
In a human lifespan, yes, it seems soon. In a commitment time frame,
Oh, it doesn't
maybe a
start till
little different.
1996. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we have a long
Yeah.
way to go. Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to know when we were in 1983 because if we go 6 years back,
That's pre-Fraggle Rock. So
yeah, and that's the thing. The last
just to
time,
put that in perspective.
yeah. Do you want to guess when we entered 1983, which would be 6 years ago in the chronological timeline of this podcast?
Is it 2025 right now?
It is currently 2025. Yes, Sam.
And we've been doing this for how long?
Since 2020.
2021.
Oh,
So
I
4
apologize.
years. Haha, I knew something Becca didn't.
Yeah, because it was
So-
about your show.
Give me a win.
So was it the beginning of last year?
Oh, Sam, it was January 2023.
Jesus, this was
So-
the beginning of 2 years ago?
Over 2.5 years ago is when we entered 1983. So at least,
This is
I'm not going
grim.
to say it's going to take 2.5 years to do another 6 years because they definitely slow down a bit on some things after Jim dies.
Yeah.
But we don't move at a fast clip here on Commitment.
No, and I'm
No,
seeing
but-
our percentage counter for Muppet Babies is only at 68, so we at the very least have so much of that left.
Let me just say, as a member of Tough Pigs, as a Tough Pigs writer for 11 years, I do not understand why you guys are spending so much time on Muppet Babies. I can
don't
tell you
either.
that I do not think it will pay off.
I don't
You
think
guys
it
keep
can.
saying
Becca, none of this will ever pay off.
I don't
There's no
think we should.
payoff.
I think to a certain extent we shouldn't even be watching Muppet Babies.
But
But-
now we're too
but
far in.
There
Yeah,
are
no, at this point, I'm not telling you to stop, but
there are things every now and then where I'm like, oh, the Muppet Babies informed that aspect of this Muppet character afterwards. Like Waka Waka, I think that heavily
yeah.
as a
And
Muppet
tomatoes
thing.
also really come from Muppet
Yeah.
Babies.
Yeah.
Throwing tomatoes at Fozzie Bear. But
Yeah.
the point is,
And it's gotten
regardless
slightly
of the
better.
rate that your podcast moves, this is kind of the end point of something.
Interesting.
And it's weird to say that it is the end point of something. And it's nice to see those montages and remember all of the good times because, like you guys said, like you guys have been saying, Sesame Street can be really good. And I
Mhm.
remember being really excited when you guys
Yeah.
realized that on the show because
Yeah,
in
it was
early
great.
episodes, you expressed some fear about going into Sesame Street.
Our first
Yeah.
episode of Sesame Street coverage, we talked about the first 10 years in one episode.
Yeah, which is ridiculous to me.
Like,
But to
I
me,
had
as
plans.
someone who's done like an hour and a half episode on Betty Lou,
Yeah.
a Muppet who does not have a personality, I did an hour and a half on Betty Lou from 1969 to 1975, just on that one Muppet
Yeah.
for 6 years.
I think we're gonna
Yeah.
go back and do some of those, right?
I have plans
Yeah.
to dive back in occasionally into Sesame Street. It's going to involve a lot of research and clip pulling on my part.
Yeah.
But the
Well, and
idea,
on Shane's part, let's
yeah,
be
let's
real.
say mostly on Shane's part. Once I give him the assignment, I'm sure he'll help out. But the plan is to dip back in. But we could never go back and watch every episode. One, because a lot of them aren't available, but also because that's so many human lifespans to do that. And the biggest thing to note is that out of the thousands of episodes, many of them are completely repeated episodes. Like they just repeat episodes.
Right.
Like nothing new or original in them. And also the other thing, many episodes are also full of clips and cartoons that you've seen a dozen times before.
Mhm.
So the way we would revisit it is to only watch the original things from an episode.
Yeah.
And so we would go back and, obviously episode 1, everything's new and original. But by episode
Not
8,
necessarily, because they repeat some of the same segments multiple
do.
times
That is
in
true.
episode
True.
1.
that is very true.
Wanda the Witch shows up twice in a row.
That's
Yeah,
right.
but she's
Um,
so good, you kind of need her.
No, you don't.
By like episode 8, even, they're already reusing a bunch of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff where we wouldn't need to rewatch everything every time. And so for me, it's more, especially focusing on the Muppet stuff they did,
Yeah.
like wanting to see as much of that as possible is sort of the important revisiting of Sesame Street I'd like to do at some point.
Yeah. This feels like an important moment though. I feel like we're at,
Yeah.
like you're saying, Becca, it feels scary. We're facing the unknown. It feels like you're some kind of sage who's warning us about the journey ahead.
Well, listen. As Hoots the Owl will sing on 90s Sesame Street to a young Jerry Nelson anything Muppet, Things are always changing,
Oh
but
gosh.
don't be sad and blue. Change can make you happy because it brings you something new.
Well, I feel like everything else you've said would not make me feel optimistic in the way Hoots might.
Yeah.
But I'll let Hoots' words
New.
be the inspiration we need in this moment.
New doesn't mean good.
So before we get out of here, I want to check in with both of you to see maybe some non-Muppet things you enjoyed this week. So Becca, we'll let you go first.
Sure. So I want to sound super classy and talk about a non-Muppet thing I've been enjoying this week, which is I've been reading, finally getting to the book Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I'm a huge fan of Leigh Bardugo's books. I loved Ninth House, which was the prequel to Hellbent, but I never read Hellbent, and now I'm finally getting to it. But the real thing that I've been enjoying this week that I should be talking about, because in truth, it's what I've maybe been enjoying more, is the show Bar Rescue, which my spouse and I have decided that we are obsessed with. The show Bar Rescue is a reality show where an angry man who looks kind of like an ogre walks into bars and tells everybody how much they suck, and then fixes the bar. And then my spouse sits on the couch, Googles the name of the bar, and finds out that it is closed.
That it closed so fast after he was
always.
He turns it into a pirate-themed bar.
No, he turns the pirate-themed bar into a bar that is themed around the concept of workplaces.
Yes.
It's everyone's favorite place to hang out after work. Workplace
that
bar.
one where he just puts like a barbershop chair like in the middle of the bar for no reason. Have you seen that one?
The pirate episode is probably the most famous episode. It's from season 4. It's called Yo Ho Ho and a Bottle of Dumb. And in that one, he takes this really awful pirate bar, and he's like, adults don't like pirates. What adults like is work. And he changes the bar to an office-themed bar. Not NBC's The Office.
Right.
But an office-themed bar called Corporate. It's such a bad idea.
Yeah.
But, you know, in a lot of ways, my spouse and I have realized that there's so much we can learn about our lives from the sage words of John Taffer from Bar Rescue. So it's kind of like Sesame Street in a lot of ways.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very educational.
I like when sometimes he finds mushrooms growing in their freezers and stuff like that.
Yeah, no,
it gross parts.
I like stand up and physically recoil whenever something gross happens on the show.
This is definitely though like a Shrek of a man.
Yeah,
so I see the comparison.
He's an odd guy.
Well, Sam, what have you been watching?
I've been scrambling all over the place, busy with a bunch of stuff. So I haven't watched too much, but I did see the movie Caught Stealing with Austin Butler. Is that his name?
But he appears to be on the poster for this movie.
Austin Butler, Zoe Kravitz, Matt Smith,
Bad
Bunny. Yeah, it's a movie directed by Darren Aronofsky, who directed Requiem for a Dream and Black Swan and The Fountain.
If you want to be disturbed, a little unsettled, pick an Aronofsky movie.
Caught Stealing is, by all accounts, I haven't seen all of his movies, his most accessible movie, and it is like a fun, in quotation marks, romp movie, but there's something that happens in like the first half of the movie that the whole rest of the movie you're like, how are you still having fun? That was the worst. That was like the worst event that could ever happen to anybody. Like, and then the tone you think is like, this is going to be a major tone shift, but then they're still just running around having a goofy good time, but just like something really like violent happens, and it's just like, this is no fun anymore. Like, I didn't want that to happen. So I didn't really like it that much. It just like took me out of it the rest of the time. I was just like, they've brushed over this so much. Gotcha. It was fine. It's the first time I've ever seen Austin Butler not being a weird monster or Elvis, and he's good and handsome and charming, of course. But
did you realize that he's white?
He's white. I did.
Okay,
every time I see him, I turn away. He's white.
He's white.
But yeah, so it was fine. Not my favorite movie of all time. It's like such a brutal movie. It's so weird. The tone is so weird. It's so brutal. And then at the end, it has like there's a cat throughout this movie, like a cat with him on his adventure, and it ends with like the animated cat in the end credits, like doing goofy stuff, and it's like people's brains were blown out. Darren Aronofsky, what are you trying to like? Like we've seen several people's necks get broken. What are you trying to do here? Just tonally, it's so all over the place in a way that doesn't feel like it's on purpose.
Why does Matt Smith look like that?
Yes.
It's the 90s. I'm saying this movie takes place in 98, but Matt Smith looks like he's solidly from like 1992 punk rock scene.
Well, that's
like in Morbius.
Maybe this is a prequel.
And it only seems to take place in the 90s because there's several situations that would be solved really easily with the cell phone. It's one of those.
They're writing the script. They're like, how do we get a cell phone out of his hand? They're like, we could always make it the 90s.
Yeah.
There's so many movies like Drive Away Dolls is like that, where like it doesn't need to be a period piece, but you realize it's only a period piece because they cannot have cell phones.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of movies now too, where they're like, this was before COVID.
Yeah.
The world's not different yet.
How about you, Matt? What have you been watching?
I'm still making my way through the MCU. I have reached a moment in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that I'm afraid might be the jumping the shark moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say about the second commercial break of episode 1.
I would agree with you, Becca.
No.
But Matt,
Okay, thank you.
Matt loves it.
I have very much enjoyed this show until the latter half of season 4 is where I am at right now. And everything's a simulation. Maybe everyone's a robot, and you're just like, I can't care anymore. Like, they make one character a robot, and you're like, all right. And then they make a couple more characters also replaced by robots, and you're like, okay. What? And then suddenly there's like an episode where literally everyone but one person is a robot, and you're like, I do not care.
They all turn into robots?
They don't turn into robots. They're replaced secretly by robots. But
this is why I think Secret Wars, the Marvel comic, is a bad idea, because once you establish that anyone could be secretly a clone, you stop caring about anything.
Yes. That's why I was so happy in in Captain Marvel when they made the Skrulls good guys, and basically I felt they said, we're never doing Secret Wars. And then they tried.
Little did you know.
Yeah, and everybody.
Little did you know they were
going
to make us not care about a handful of characters by saying, oh, actually, that very touching moment that they had in Endgame. Sorry, Skrull.
Or maybe not. Who knows?
Who the hell cares?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to be watching Secret Wars. I wasn't watching Secret Wars. Matthew, you're going to get there.
Yeah,
I will eventually. But that's even a looser time frame than commitment stuff, because I'm not doing it for content. It's just me for me. But yeah, I'm worried going into season 5 what if this show has truly jumped the shark. But I've also been watching The Paper, which I think last time we recorded, I said I watched the first episode and I liked. I still like it. I don't like it as much as the first episode. I've seen you getting
a little iffy on it on the Discord.
There's just one character who sucks a lot, and they keep her around in a way that makes no sense to me. And she does not, it's not like a Michael Scott situation where you're like, well, he's the boss, so we have to tolerate him. It's, well, she's here and she's obnoxious and she constantly tries to ruin people's lives, but I guess we have to tolerate her because she's on the TV show.
Right.
It just seems like she's on a different version of what this show is. And everyone else is kind of like watching her do something and go like, all right, we're going to get back to our show now and ignore what you just did. I got 2 more left, and unfortunately, from what I hear in our Discord, she gets worse before the end of the season, whereas it's kind of the opposite of what I was hoping was happening, because there's a couple episodes where she does something nice for someone, shows some character growth, and I'm like, okay, from now on, maybe she'll be less obnoxious. And then someone's like, actually, she's going to get worse.
I'd say you could stop watching the show, but I know that you can't.
I say someone could. I cannot.
Right.
But there's also 2 episodes left, so like,
fair.
I'm not going to give up on that.
It's so freeing to stop watching a show. It's so freeing to just get up and walk out of the room and be like,
I imagine you're right, but I don't know that I've ever done it. So
and be like, season 4 of Riverdale was disappointing, so I'm not going to watch seasons 5, 6, or 7.
Yes. I liked that character on Vampire Diaries. Now they're dead, and I will move on with my life. I don't have to think about this anymore.
Who watched every episode of Nip Tuck,
man.
You know, I am trapped in a hellscape
You're a
where
sick,
I
sick
must
man.
complete TV shows. Well, I gotta say once again, thank you, Becca, for being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy that we finally did this.
Yeah.
It was something that was on the books for a while, and I'm glad
we literally
finally
had this scheduled for the Sunday before my daughter was born.
Correct.
Oh,
Originally,
wow.
we were gonna record this that day. That was before I knew she was going to be born the following day. And then we were told the week beforehand, like, hey, so you have to have your baby next week. And we were like, oh, hey, Becca, so I can't record next week because I have to have a baby.
and I was not understanding at all.
No,
I
you
said,
started throwing things?
Yeah,
He
I
was
said,
pissed.
which was weird that you knew that
I can
because
feel it.
I
in
live
the
on the other
universe.
side of the country.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was like, you're never going to succeed in this business
Yeah.
if you.
Call from the hospital, Matt.
I'm going to start telling all the other Muppet podcasters about your unprofessional behavior here.
Mhm.
Well, I
Canceling
gotta-
guests because of a baby.
Because of a baby.
I gotta say, I really appreciate the outside, like, expert perspective on Sesame Street.
Ooh,
I
yeah.
feel like that is something that we don't get into as much because it's such a big monumental thing that it's been really good to hear, like, some of this context and some of these stories that we don't know anything about. I'd love to hear more of them.
I'm really glad that I could kind of put things in the perspective of the big picture perspective for you.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, you're
for us
here
with the show.
for the people who, listen to the show and yell at us. Be like, how do you idiots not know about Ruby Monster?
We're sorry. We're sorry.
Listen, one day I'm going to have to do a whole episode on Ruby Monster, and I'm not looking forward to it because I'm not sure how much there is to say about Ruby Monster.
Well, you'll find out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, what would you like people to go follow or check out or just keep up with you on?
Yeah, if I can plug a handful of things, if that's allowed. So first of all, you can find me on Blue Sky is probably the social media platform I use the most. At Tall Girl Petunia, all one word. You can obviously find me on toughpigs.com. I write articles there, and also on the Tough Pigs Discord, which I'm in charge of moderating. My podcast, A Prairie Dawn Companion, you can find it on the Muppet Fan Podcasts with toughpigs.com podcast feed. And I also do another podcast that's not related to the Muppets. That's
Why?
It's possible. Well, you're what you should understand because it's related to Marvel, actually.
Okay, yeah.
I'm doing
currently the only two things I'm allowed to consume. So
correct, yeah. But this is not about the Marvel TV. I'm doing a podcast called Here Comes Tomorrow with biographer and journalist Josephine Reisman. Josephine Reisman wrote, among other things, the biography of Stan Lee and the biography of Vince McMahon. And Josie and I are currently going through every issue of the Grant Morrison New X-Men comic from 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sort of treating it as a text that we can take seriously to think about cultural commentary about things like fascism and transphobia and whether or not Wolverine is hot. The three most important questions.
Is he? He's not hot in that one, is he? I feel like he's a little bit of a gremlin in that one.
So Grant Morrison says that one of the key factors to making X-Men popular is making Wolverine hot.
Okay.
And I've spent the entire time we've been reading this trying to figure out if Grant Morrison is successfly making Wolverine hot. They're not doing the art, but whatever.
Yeah.
So you can find that at Here Comes Tomorrow on all major...
I've seen a cowboy image with some tight jeans of a Wolverine. And I gotta say, I get what they're going for.
Okay, so you think he's hot. Sam...
Well, okay. Do I think he's hot? I don't know. Do I think
let me
they're
be clear,
really trying to make him hot?
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I understand, gender sexuality. You probably would not be in a relationship with Wolverine. Sam, do you think he's hot?
I remember reading this comic and not picking up a lot of hotness from him in this particular run. But
I think he's got a bit of a butterface situation.
I do think in general, Wolverine he's got to be hot. Like, I think he's probably like sucking and fucking all over the Marvel universe. He's a sexual animal.
The problem is Hugh Jackman has spoiled us, because Hugh Jackman, I think,
I think the Marvel Comics idea of Wolverine is hotter than Hugh Jackman. There's something sexless about Hugh Jackman to me. So
Sam, he's the greatest showman.
that's true.
Both in and out of the bedroom.
That's true. He's married to the circus. I can't think of it any other way, you know?
But you can find that show at Here Comes Tomorrow on all major podcatchers and at herecomes tomorrow.net on Blue Sky.
Well, so next time, it's a big one, folks. We will be watching and discussing the first episode of the Jim Henson Hour. The episode is titled Outer Space. The second half of the episode features another storyteller episode, this one called The Heartless Giant. So we make our return to the storyteller, and also we take off on our journey of a brand new television series. And I'm very excited about this one.
Me too.
You know, regardless of how we end up feeling about it,
Yeah.
I'm excited to dive into it.
It's a
because
new,
it's just been on the
big,
horizon
weird
for
thing.
so long.
Yeah.
I've said this to you guys. I'm so excited for you guys to watch the Jim Henson Hour. I think it is so much, you know, obviously Jim couldn't have known that he was going to die the next year, but it is so much like the conclusion of 34 years of Muppet stuff. Really is the Jim Henson Hour. And I don't mean that it's the best thing, but I mean like it really does feel like we're going to do it all. We're going to do everything that the Muppets can do for 8 weeks, and then we are canceled.
Which the ambition of that is something that, you know, we've talked about before. Even if we don't enjoy the final product every time, we admire Jim's attempts at the most crazy batshit things. So I'm excited to see all those ideas come together. So we'll be discussing that, as well as a few TV appearances Jim and the Muppets did around that time to promote the new series, including Dog, you know, famous storyteller Dog, hanging out on the Red Nose Day special for some reason. He just is there a lot. I don't know that we'll have anything to say about it, but we have to watch it. So
they got to give that dude a name.
Doggle. I will forever refer to him as Doggle because he just sounds like Hoggle.
Yeah.
As we thank Becca for being on today's show, we also want to thank our friend Tuna for making the music for this podcast and Cassie Wilson for singing our theme song. Don't forget to go to commitment.com for all your commitment needs. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast on your platform of choice. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at mail@commitment.com or follow us on social media at commitmentpod or at commitment.com on Blue Sky. And as always, you can follow me at Matthew Gatos.
And I'm Sam Schultz.
And as always, keep believing.
Keep pretending.